In order to start, we would like to hear the speakers telling us a little bit about what planetary peace means to each and every one of you. So please, if you may, maybe Paul, in the order I introduced you, maybe Paul, if you could start by telling us a little bit of what planetary peace means to you.
Okay, so let me give you a sort of thumbnail sketch on how this concept came to be. After October 7 of last year, when the Israel-Gaza war started, a lot of people at the Club of Rome were very upset about what was going on. Now it is being considered a form of genocide, and they kept on sending emails saying, we, the Club of Rome, should be doing something about this. Historically, what the Club of Rome has done is when there is a war like this started, like in Ukraine, we issue a statement, uh, like an op-ed, 800 words, 1,000 words, denouncing the war, saying everybody should stop fighting and be peaceful. So they said we should at least issue a statement like that. And I felt I had just taken over as the co-president of the Club of Rome at that time. And I felt that these statements are actually quite useless. Nobody reads them. Everybody's already made up their minds on war. They don't really have any big impact, even though the Club of Rome thinks it has a big name and it has a big influence. In reality, nobody cares what these statements are about. So I said, instead of writing a statement, all of you who are so concerned about this, why don't we all write our own statements? So I invited all of these people to write essays about what the war in Gaza and Ukraine and Somalia meant to them and what could be done to prevent these kinds of conflicts. That conversation took off on our internal mail servers and in various emails. And a year and a half later, it has emerged in the form of two publications. One is titled uh, Enduring Peace in the Anthropocene, a series of essays that tries to address the challenges of mass violence in this period that we are calling the Anthropocene. And the second one is a concept paper called Planetary Peace, which describes this idea of peace not just as an absence of war, not just an absence of conflict between nations and people, but an attempt to create a planetary scale protection or security against mass violence, realizing that mass violence is not going to just be from human groups among nations or sub-state entities, but there's a lot of mass violence that's going to emerge from the breakdown of ecosystems in the Anthropocene. So we wanted to argue that the traditional concepts of peace, which is fighting amongst ourselves, are obsolete, and we need a new concept of peace that allows people like you and me, who are bystanders of war. None of us are able to participate in anything meaningful to do with peace. We can maybe donate some money to charitable causes or to refugees, but by and large, we are outside of the realm of influence of the current definitions of peace. And we wanted to create a definition of peace that was about engagement of ordinary people, changing our everyday lives. So we started in that paper by talking about what we call existential risks, and I'll be happy to share the paper with all of you. And existential risks are all the risks that are out there, from climate change to COVID and other pandemics to biodiversity decline and AI. And then say that along with these existential risks, there are certain existential opportunities. Opportunities to redefine what it means to be human, and opportunities to engage in economics, in politics, in society, in culture, in peace positive ways. So, what would a peace economy look like, for example? Our solution to it is that you've got to do a non-violent economy that doesn't just extract out of the earth and kill the soil and kill animals. 80 billion animals. 80 billion animals. 10 times the number of human population being killed every year to feed us. This is not, not a peaceful food system that we have inherited. So we need to rethink everything from food, water, energy, etc., with a peace-centric mindset. And we have to do the same thing for education, for politics, for culture, for society, and all aspects of life. It is in that conception, that overarching conception of peace, that all of us have a role to play. We can decide what we want to do with our lives. We don't have to become a cog in the wheel that the world has created. And we can take actions that are peaceful, both in terms of ourselves, developing internal peace, peace with our neighbors and our communities, and peace with the natural world. So I'll stop over here because there is a lot more. And of course, I'm happy to share the paper for those of you all who want to read it. But perhaps the other speakers can add their components to it, and then we can have a more detailed conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert. Sorry, Paul. And thank you for sticking to the time. I know that this is something that we could go on talking for like an hour, each of us, but this will give us an amazing opportunity for all of us to have a great feedback. So now, Robert, please, if you may, we would like to hear a couple of your ideas.
Sure. So I'll try and be 5 minutes again. Thank you, Paul. So I want to start with the quote that is on the UNESCO Constitution. It's the very famous words. I'm aware that we're not just talking about peace in the sense of conflict. We're going to talk about something much broader, but this is a good step into it. The UNESCO Constitution starts with the words, since wars start in the minds of men, it's in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And one of my absolute favorite peace builders is the Norwegian Canadian woman Elise Boulding, often known as the matriarch of peace studies. And one of the wonderful things that she does is she describes a continuum of peace, from extermination, of the kind of most extreme kind of war at one end, and having stable war, unstable war, including threats, where deterrence, power is exercised through threats, a sort of central part of the continuum about arbitration, mediation, negotiation, and then towards the other end of the spectrum, alliance, cooperation, integration, transformation, and union, and a warm, embracing peace at the other end. And I like this idea of a continuum because I'm really aware that, as a human being, I'm capable of all sorts of reactions to things. And that brings me on to a different continuum, which comes from the philosophical framework that I understand as a Buddhist. And there is a principle which some of you may know, some of you may have not heard of it before. We call it the 10 worlds, or the 10 states of life. And it's a continuum too. And it talks about, it's about psychological reaction to what we encounter and experience in our daily lives. And again, like Elise Boulding's continuum, there are 10 parts to it. And the sort of the extreme end is the world or the state of life called hell, which is when we feel trapped by our circumstances and we express rage as a result of that. And then hunger, which can lead us, of course, is about food, but it can also be about possessions. It can be about how we needing to possess in a relationship, that sort of thing. Anger, which comes from our ego, so that can escalate and could lead to violence of one sort or another. There's a world called animality, where we really act on the basis of our instincts. It's the world where we can be unwise, we can be foolish in our behavior. And those 4 worlds, hell, hunger, anger, and animality, are the ones which really lead to the things that cause problems in the world. And we see greed, anger, and foolishness as really the fundamental cause of pretty much every problem the world is facing. In the middle, there are 2 more gentle worlds, tranquility and heaven or rapture. And then there are 4 other states where we put effort into our behavior. We realize that we can't just react to what's going on in the world. And so there's the world of learning and then one of realization, where we try to improve ourselves either through our own intuition or through what we learn from other people. And then there's the world of compassion, where we take altruistic action to support other people. And the 10th world is the enlightened world, where we are in absolute harmony with people and we are aware of the dignity of our life and the dignity of other people's lives. And so if the problems of the world are caused by greed, anger, and foolishness, it's about redirecting the energy that manifests in selfish greed and anger and making a change of direction of that energy towards prosperity and happiness. And then the foolishness is also about developing the understanding of the importance of service to other people. So my starter in this discussion is to introduce the 10 worlds as an idea, a continuum, a human way of responding to things. And the idea of transformation, and the conference that has been referenced possibly before the recording started, but the conference we recently held together with the Club of Rome at Taplow Court was about this idea of inner transformation, or as we call it, the human revolution. This need for an inner change which helps us steer away from greed, anger, and foolishness to prosperity, happiness, and service. And I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Robert, for this small tour through the 10 to these 10 ways. Now, Cathy-Mae, if you please, if you may, we would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much, Matthias. And I'm also going to go for the 5-minute slot and hope that I can follow my my fellow panelists. Starting by saying that we are actually world makers. And so when we speak about the possibilities or this vision, this shared vision of planetary peace, that this is really something that we are able to create, that through collaboration and working together, this is something that does not only have to be a vision, but something that is realizable. And I want to spend a bit of time here speaking about mindsets and about dominant narratives and perspectives and how much we are conditioned to see the world through chasms and breaking and divisions. And of course, Steve Biko famously said that one of the biggest challenges we have is the challenge of changing minds and changing mindsets. His quote was, of course, in relation to the liberation struggle in South Africa, where he spoke about the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. We tend to forget that we too are conditioned, that our minds and the ways in which we see the world are conditioned, and we tend to repeat the patterns and reproduce even the patterns that we don't like. So this business of shifting mindsets, of deep systems change, is entirely possible. But of course, we are creating a world that we don't necessarily know what it looks like, because the world is shaping and morphing around us all of the time. So this brings me to the second area of awakening, reawakening to our dreams and imaginaries, and especially for young people, encouraging the deep listening that hears, that leans into these imaginaries and dreams and solutions and different ways of seeing the world that aren't tired, that aren't stayed, that aren't already tested. So this way of really remaining open, asking ourselves, how generous our deep listening actually is, and how much our minds are already made up when we even start to engage in deep listening. So really wondering about a world of the qualities of dignity and respect, and the values of compassion and kindness, and the practices of freedom and love. How do we practice these on a daily basis in order to be making these worlds all the time and not imagining that they are something that happens in the future? And then really considering this incredible work, this gift that Edward Said offered us in his work around othering, and remembering that our capacities to become bridges, to actually build bridges in worlds, to cross the chasms and divides that seem so normal, is really possible. And of course, this work of how do we create belonging, bridging and belonging without othering, asks all of us to search for those ways in which we break, because it's very easy to see how others break worlds and cause divisions and chasms. It's a lot more difficult to find the ways in which we ourselves cause breakages and chasms and divisions within the world. So the deep practices of what it means to be a bridger, what it means to create belonging without othering. And then, of course, leaning alongside the work of the Othering and Belonging Institute, leaning into the incredible work of the Tutu Legacy Foundation, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, which is imparting the trainings of courageous leaders. How do we encourage courageous leadership where we are building leaders of service for our times? Of course, there is so much more to say about reweaving the inner and the outer, about the fact that we are living in a living universe, that we have very little comprehension of the fact that the trillions of cells in our body are in constant communication, that our organisms do not end with the barriers of our skins. So really embracing these very different ways of seeing the world and sitting in our power and in uncertainty as a way of being together. These, I think, are all ways in which we can step into this creation of new paradigms. Thank you so much, Matthias.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for making the effort to stick to the time. I know it's hard to talk about these deep issues and try to stick to a small presentation. And finally, Vrajesh, please, we would like to hear a little bit of your thoughts on all of this that we're talking about.
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure sharing this panel with all of you, especially Paul, Robert, and Cathy-san. And thank you, Matthias, for inviting me. It's an honor to co-host this session along with the 50%. So I represent the Positive Peace Society, which is a student club at Hiroshima University. We almost started this club about a year ago in the heights of the ongoing war. And me personally coming and studying international peace, we really felt that we as a student need to do something about this. So in that hope, we started this club. And also, because we are from Hiroshima, Hiroshima has this unique history for peace, right? So we had to do something about it. And our university really supported us a lot. And Hiroshima University does a lot of things for peace. So we learned a lot on peace here. And then we felt like, okay, we are learning a lot from books, but we also need to express this and put into practice by actually doing something about it. So in that hope, we started this club. And I think students here especially in Hiroshima, has this attitude for showing change for peace. I don't know about other cities in Japan, but Hiroshima has the specific, expression to show something about peace. So we started here, and then we also got a lot of support from Institute of Economic and Peace, I think, which is from Australia. So they are very high on the concept of positive peace. So we did a lot of workshops and training with them. And then we are trying to spread this concept of positive peace through various different kind of activities. And then we came to meet Matthias, and together also we did a lot of workshops and collaborations on conflict resolutions and other things. And I think here at the Positive Peace, what we're trying to do is also connect peace with different disciplines. I think it's very important. I think one of the members here, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jennifer, mentioned about music, right? So we want to integrate all different sorts of disciplines. Music can be a great one. Sports can be a great one, like Olympics, like teamwork, So we're also working on integrating sports and especially technology. I think as of now, I think in the heights of rising AI, it has become very important how we can also use those kind of tools to promote peace and how it can reduce further income inequality or reduce conflicts. So we as a student here are taking steps to do whatever we can in best of our capabilities. And, we try to participate in all this session and learn from experts like you. So that's from my side, from Positive Peace. I'll be happy to share more details later. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you very much. You've been all so amazing in sticking to the committed time for making this. And the idea to having such a short first presentation was that we all have the opportunity to have a dialogue between each other, with the speakers. So now we have an open floor for whoever wants to make a comment, a question, maybe ask one of the speakers or all of them to try to have a more depth definition on something they have said. The only thing I'm going to ask is that every intervention, we try to keep it as short as possible so we can have as much richness from this dialogue as we can. So if anyone has already something in mind, please just unmute yourselves and go ahead.
I have a quick question for Paul, if I may. I know that's not very intergenerational.
Yes, please go ahead.
But I just wondered, Paul, when you asked for the opinions of your fellow members of the Club of Rome, were you surprised by what they wrote, or were they? I know the Club of Rome has over 100 members, and a lot of people with different disciplines and so on. But was there a response that surprised you, or were the responses what you were anticipating?
Yeah. So the range of opinions were, of course, very diverse given the diversity of the club itself. But what was surprising to me was the emotional intensity and the polarization among the members. Some members wanted the club to take a position which would publicly denounce Israel and Biden and the United States for being warmongers, and they had much more harsh language than I'm using. And then there was another group that said, well, we want to stay in this conversation and we want to build a discourse on peace that is different from accusation and demonization and would contribute positively. But the extremes were very apparent, and I was surprised. I thought people who are members of the club would sort of be somewhat more guarded and more politic about expressing themselves. But most of these conversations happened on an internal email server, so it's not public domain. But the extreme views, I mean, it looked like I was in the United States dealing with Trump versus Biden. All of this was happening during the election year. So the level of polarization that I saw within the club matched the level of polarization that we were experiencing outside. That was the surprising part. But overall, I think the messages that came out, I think the other surprising thing was that I had not thought about cultural trauma in the very deep ways that was brought out in these conversations. There are psychologists at the Club of Rome, and there are people from many different spiritual disciplines. And their sense was that the Gaza war was unlike most other wars in the sense that the multi-generational trauma it was leaving behind, not only for the people that were experiencing it directly, but for all of us who were watching it on live TV. I mean, the world was participating in this war in a in a public way that we haven't participated in prior wars because of the limited amount of media that can get in. But here, I think this war was being fought on the internet, and it deeply, deeply affected the lives of a lot of people who were not in the theater of war. And it kind of opened up to us the question of if we can do this to our fellow man and woman, what does it mean to be human? This is a question that has been troubling the Club of Rome, and we've been addressing it, but this war like really brought it to our faces. Like we call ourselves humanity, and look at the inhumanity we are raining upon children and women and nature as a whole. Maybe that answers some of your question.
Thank you.
I think if I may ask one more question to Professor Paul, how do you see the current election in the US, and how do you see where is the world heading for the next 5-6 years? And do you see some major turning events happening around the world, which will also impact how we look at peace?
Yeah, of course. I think this election has completely changed all the assumptions that we make about peace. I mean, Mr. Trump has explicitly said that he's going to bring an end to the war in Ukraine, which means, I mean, to some people that means peace, but I believe in what I call just peace. So peace has to come with justice. Peace has to be based on justice. You can't just stop wars and call it peace if you're giving away all the land that normally would belong to Ukraine. So it's going to have a direct impact on the war in Ukraine, both in terms of money and treasure, because the purse strings are not now going to be controlled by uh, Trump and his party. I think in the Middle East too, there is, I think, less leverage than Mr. Biden had. But of course, that whole war is fought with American weapons and American treasure. And with the change in regime in Washington, there is going to be a huge impact. I think it's not positive impact in most cases. Uh, and then the third element of wars that we are most concerned about is the war on nature. And if those of you who follow American politics, if you have read the Project 2025, which is the manual of systems change produced by the Heritage Foundation, it is simply a manual for outright war on nature. They want to eliminate any kind of climate action. They want to open up drilling to all the reserved areas. They want to go back and drill coal and go and support the coal economy. So in terms of climate change and pollution and natural resource exploitation, it's going to be reversing direction. The US is probably going to pull out of the Paris Peace Accord, if we are to believe what Mr. Trump has publicly said. So yeah, it's a huge, huge consequence, and a very disturbing one.
I have a question here to make that might be a little bit, I don't know, polemic. Do you, maybe to whoever wants to speak, but also Paul, now that you're based in the US and I just heard you talking about Trump, do you think that Trump actually has a peace agenda? No, like there's been a lot of speech on the side of Republican affiliates saying that Trump was actually the one who stopped wars and conflicts and things like that.
If somebody wants to answer that, but I do see that Trump is concerned about peace, but it doesn't necessarily involve peace with justice. It's a very transactional view of peace to protect resources. It's a kind of financial view of peace that is very monetarily driven. So his whole attitude towards world peace, which in a lot of ways is currently managed through the framework of NATO and alliances, his view of NATO is that all the NATO countries should be paying for. So the way I see his peace agenda, it is there. I mean, it's not that he's not thought about it. It's definitely there. But doesn't have the sophistication or the future-looking aspects to it that would provide just and enduring peace. So he could bring an end to one war here or a skirmish there or a conflict here at whatever terms that he and his team wants to do. But that to me is not enduring peace.
Absolutely. And I think a number of people have said in this conversation, peace is not the absence of war. It's not just the absence of war. You know, it's, excuse me, there are other elements, and I completely agree with Paul that there are the things that I'm not seeing in the statements that President-elect Trump is making, which suggest anything about an understanding of equality or compassion or love, whatever word you want, or you know, certainly equality, and a sanctity for peace. That you know, really about the preciousness of life, whether it's in one's community, one's country, one's continent, or the wider world. And given your briefing document, Matthias, for this event, you know, planetary peace, that means it's not just stopping a conflict between nations, it's about stopping this war that human beings are having with the planet. And that, you know, we need to be respecting and loving and nurturing the planet, without which we would be dust. And that's what is the big concern. So yes, Paul's right, you know, that there may be steps that would stop a conflict or two conflicts, but what about all those other elements? And planetary peace requires all of those. And I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, my teacher, Daisaku Ikeda, years of peace proposals, and people may ask, well, what difference did they make that there had to be so many? But a lot of the ideas that he promoted were adopted, whether in the Sustainable Development Goals or in other arenas. But one of the things he said was that the root cause of conflict is this helpless feeling that people have that an individual can't make a difference. And of course, the moment you feel like that, then the demagogues have won. So we have to recognize that the people are sovereign, that our understanding of the dignity of our lives will help us to manifest incredible, wonderful, dynamic, creative power. And that it may look like the power is in certain figures or certain organizations, but we must never forget the power that people have. And that when the moment we recognize the dignity of our own lives, of other people's lives, then this opens up, unlocks infinite potential. And that leads to all of those positive qualities which go beyond just stopping a conflict. So yes, let's remember that peace has so many more aspects than we might just see from one argument, one dispute coming to an end.
If I may add just a small comment, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, I'm truly sorry, but also not just remember that the power that we have to transform reality, also understanding that connections multiply the power we have to transform our reality. If two people are working towards something, it's not 1 + 1, it's one multiplying the potential of the others. I have seen, sadly, I have seen that, and well, you know that in Argentina we have this president who's extreme right, referent libertarian, who, yeah, among other things, advocates for war. And I have seen the people from his party supporting each other in social media and making echo of themselves and what they're saying. And they have managed to absolutely obliterate from the public conversation traditional legacy media. That actually, Elon Musk talks a lot about that. They are obliterating legacy media and traditional media through social media, and it's just through a system of solidarity in which they just listen to each other and replicate each other many times, and that has a multiplying effect. And that is to say, not that doesn't only have like an tactical dimension, but also is to say that when we are aligned in spirit and in goals, there's much that we can do. Yeah. There are 2% in the world now that proves that.
I was going to say something that on the election of Trump, I actually cried for about a day because of the rhetoric, the hateful rhetoric, and just the whole spectacle. I found it so disturbing. And then I sat down. I am a Buddhist, I'm an SGI member, and I sat down with my sort of daily practice, and suddenly this kind of energy started to surge within me. And I began to think that actually, although, you know, the stories are multiple and overwhelming in society, what I do have control over is my own immediate environment. And, you know, so I kind of on the next day made a commitment to myself that I would live a more human life and really attempt to connect with those people around me, because I understand that, you know, when there is when systems are in a state of decline or disintegration, it's very small, cohesive groups of people with a very strong, determined energy that can shift things. And although it can seem like it's overwhelming in terms of the chaos, actually that small group of determined individuals can make a huge difference. So, you know, at my university, because I'm working with so many young people and supporting so many young people, I'm always on the lookout for opportunities to engage and really kind of garner conversations and dialogue. And most recently, you know, through building bonds of trust and friendship at the institution where I am, you know, there became the opportunity to stage an exhibition around, you know, the climate crisis, and for young people to engage in activities that help to promote the SDGs. And, you know, so we had a week-long series of activities that the university completely fell behind and supported us 100%, and had lots of wonderful encounters and a really great outcome. And I was able to facilitate a space where students from the music department could come in and perform. And they gave really the most heartfelt, beautiful performances. And, you know, in my role as a teacher, you know, I've been teaching folk music for a couple of years, and we really explore, you know, the theme of connection to the environment. And a lot of the young people that I've been supporting have written some of the most beautiful songs about the natural environment. So when I hear, you know, young people's hearts, I really do feel that there's great hope. And I know that although we have this media spectacle that is bombarding us, actually we have all of these everyday connections, multiple connections, upon which we can build a deepening peace. And I really feel that, you know, there's been an outcry regarding what's going on in Gaza. We can't escape it. But in a way, it's a call to everybody to really come together with an even deeper commitment. And I really do feel that in the people around me at the moment. I feel that there is a deepening commitment for people to connect heart to heart in a more open and integral way. And even at Goldsmiths University, there's been a massive restructuring with people being brought back into the centre and their well-being being fully acknowledged. So these small shifts, I feel, are part of a bigger momentum. And of course, every time we reach, you know, a stage where we're hugely challenged, it then, I feel it creates an opportunity for humans to rise and, you know, draw something else out of the situation, you know, something out of a crisis. So despite the horrors, I do see a lot of beauty around me, and I do see a lot of genuine humanity, and that's what I believe is the truth of humanity, despite the fact that, you know, political leaders at the moment are obviously engaged in the most horrendous acts. I do believe that human beings have a inherent desire to survive and live together. I think we've been primed for hundreds of thousands of years to live in cooperation and not to obliterate each other. And I think that's within our sort of DNA. That is, you know, that's encoded within us. And I think that that is the driving force that will make the difference.
Thank you, Jennifer. And you have a hand up, Jessica. I'm just seeing that Matthias is still muted. And once you've spoken, Jessica, I'll go after you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. So I am in America, and it was pretty shocking for me and a lot of my community that Trump actually won. We really didn't expect it. I think most of us here in America didn't expect that he would even be allowed to run again, or that any of this would even move forward. But somehow it just kept happening. You know, according to our legislations, he shouldn't have been allowed to even run again with everything that he's gone through with court and impeachment and all sorts of stuff. But there is a very strong sense of fear here right now. I'm in my mid-30s, but you know, it's not just this age range or the youngers, it's all of us. We feel like there's a high probability of another civil war breaking out. And instead of it being over the slaves, at this time it's over gender and female human rights. And that it could come because he has been pushing such a message to eradicate these other things that don't align with this, you know, image that he has created. And last time when he ran, most people in these outliner communities that don't fit this Trump American dream sort of idea became extremely bullied at schools, at restaurants, at bus stops, even. Like, it's kind of actually a very terrifying time, I feel, to be in America right now. And it's almost still shocking that it's real, that he is in office. And now people are talking about how he is the Christ of second coming. They're bringing religion into it, of making that he's the savior. And then at the same time, others are talking that he's the Antichrist. And it's a very, it's a hard time. But I appreciate what the woman right before had just spoken about, because I do believe that when we come together, a few with that strong mindset can help change things. And I hope that that's what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and to you, Jennifer, for naming the world stage. Obviously, the US is a strong focal point for many people, but it's interesting looking at why that is the case in the first instance, and how it almost detracts from the genocidal wars that we are seeing in other parts of the world. And as you said earlier, Paul, that we are all witness to. This is not something that we are disconnected from at all. So there is something about humanity that is morphing and changing all the time. And Jennifer, you named this, and I'm not sure if it's an invitation, but you named this opportunity to actually rise differently. And it's not in reaction to something. It actually is creating something. So this business of, it takes 2 or 3% of the world population, given that at the moment we're seeing things in terms of humans making changes, right? We forget that the earth and the living universe is far more intelligent than we are. We see ourselves as needing to save the earth, but of course we forget that the earth has ways of regenerating as well. So there are mind shifts that we need to make as well. There is humility that we require in this process of collaboration, of building bridges, of recognizing that we are certainly not hyper individualized, and something that the Western world has been so successful at is to make us feel atomized, to make us feel overwhelmed, to make us feel as if we are isolated and on our own. That has been a part of a project, and a very successful part of a project. So I'm really keen to hear from more voices about this work of building planetary peace, about the work of how we show up and how we show up on a daily basis to actually build differently to what we have at the moment. It would be wonderful to hear more voices in that regard. Thank you.
Well, I would start by saying that this is a way of building planetary peace, meeting among each other and taking the time to actually talk about this, and also bearing in mind that this conversation is just a Kickstarter. We need to take action from here. We need to I said this in Tableau also. Being in these places is a privilege. It's a privilege that we're all sharing. We are probably going to leave this Zoom room knowing so much more and so inspired. And that's also that we have the burden. I mean, probably not the burden because it's kind of elitist on my side. Probably we need to leave this place embracing the responsibility of saying, okay, so if I have this privilege, I need to share with everyone near me. So it's about going out there and trying to transform the reality that surrounds us, or called transforming it as.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in over here because I'm really touched by Jessica's comments and also her voice, but there's so much emotion in it. And I can almost feel her here sitting in Colorado and in the midst of that kind of polarization that is scary on one side. But I also have started to see that polarization as now an opportunity for engagement. There is a lot of stuff that is going wrong in the world. Systems are breaking down at all levels. We call it a world of polycrisis. But it's also a world of a lot of opportunity. And I want to say that one mode of resistance to what is going on in the United States, and by the way, it's not just the United States. I mean, different forms of this kind of autarky and uh, religious fervor is also happening in India under Modi, and Turkey under Erdogan, and in a lot of places. So US is probably the most visible example of it, but many countries are facing similar kind of challenges. And I want to propose the metaphor of building our own islands of sanity in this world that has been overtaken by all kinds of insanity, social as well as ecological. And there is a lot of power in individuals. There's a lot of power in communities. Cathy-Mae and others have mentioned before that empathy, and I think it was Jennifer who mentioned empathy is what has brought us evolutionarily to this point. And we should not lose hope. We should take responsibility and start changing our own lives and start engaging in a different way. Uh, the other day, I ran into somebody at a breakfast table who was diametrically opposite of everything that I believe in. He's a Trumpy, he's a Christian nationalist, he's wants the church, his church particularly, to take over control of government. I couldn't agree with him on anything. Within 5 minutes, I knew that this conversation was not going to go anywhere and I should walk away from it. But then I thought that's what I would do for the 70 years that I've lived. Walk away from these conversations that are not in my vision sane. I mean, this guy was literally insane. And I decided that I'm not going to walk away. I'm going to engage. I spent 45 minutes trying to elicit from him each of the positions, the talking points that he had, trying to provide some data to the contrary, trying to reason with him, trying to use my systems of logic, failing completely because it would just make him quiet. But I came out of that conversation with a very positive result for myself. It gave me a sense that I can do something about the insanity that is out there. And the first way to deal with it is you got to engage. You got to control yourself and not just blow up at everybody who disagrees with you. And around this time of holidays, when we are meeting with our families and friends, uh, we should not remain silent. We should find a way of engaging in these difficult conversations. I think it's uh, rather than completely withdraw into our own despair, I think engaging with the other without necessarily giving up our position, but to make a genuine effort to understand what the other is. Because the fact of the matter in the US is that 77 million people voted for Mr. Trump. And we can't just say these guys are all crazy and mad and we're going to ignore them. We have to find a way of reuniting. So to me, personal engagement on matters that are difficult for us to tackle is one part of it. It requires emotional resilience. It requires psychological resilience, things that Cathy-Mae mentioned earlier, and is working to improve among youth, particularly with regard to climate change. I think that's all very important work, and we need to somehow find the fortitude and the courage to remain engaged and not lose hope.
And Paul, after saying I'm so keen to hear from everybody else, I'm going to say that I think those are incredible examples, this business of extending ourselves and not falling into our old patterns of our minds being made up, and actually daring to do something different. And it's not always going to work. But of course, it's running that alongside the fact that what Jennifer was also speaking about is building movements, right? That this isn't simply going to happen one conversation at a time. We're needing to build movements based on the principles of bridging, of building bridges, of building belonging, of building spaces where people actually can feel brave and courageous. So there are many, many ingredients in this pot that we are embracing. And now it would be lovely to hear some other voices, please.
Can you hear me at all? Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, just to kind of go off of what you were just saying, Miss Cathy-Mae, I was thinking about the importance of common ground and finding, if we can find anything where there is common ground between those in our, whether it's in our families or our neighbors, that we might have drastically different views and perspectives with, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially when it comes to different religious backgrounds. And I've been I'm a member of SGI, but most of my family is like Protestant and Christian, and a lot of times it's been difficult to broach topics with my family, whether it's political or social issues, or we just tend to disagree on most everything. But I found that, I guess, being a good listener, sometimes they have been willing at least to maybe not acknowledge what I'm saying, but sometimes to listen. Whether or not they respond is another thing. But I think that, I mean, one of my best friends is a Jordanian Muslim guy, and really wonderful person and good friend of mine. And he and I have conversations about some of these topics quite a lot, finding common ground and amongst our friends and family members and everything. And he told me a story that his father and he had devoted an entire summer one year to reading the Quran, the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, and I think the Torah, and I think the Christian Old Testament, but reading them all together, and trying to understand like the differences between them. And I thought that was really a beautiful undertaking, and I think the more that, just as individuals, if we can find ways to, as Paul mentioned, to engage with our neighbors, even if it's just to ask questions and be curious and try to find one little remnant of common ground, I think we can maybe build something, even if it's just trust between us. I think sometimes building that trust that, okay, I will listen to what you have to say, sometimes I think can go a long way.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts, Emily. I would really, really like to be mindful of the time because I know that many of us are way past over bedtime. So I hate to break the wonderful spirit that we have built, but maybe I would like to keep the word back specifically for the speakers in order to make some closing comments, and then we can just say goodbye, at least for today. For sure, after such a wonderful conversation, we will all like to commit to a second dialogue at some moment. So maybe I don't know, maybe we could move like backwards. I don't know, Vrajesh, if you could say some closing thoughts, share some closing thoughts with us.
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful session. I got to learn a lot from everyone on the panel. And I think the youth needs to do much more regarding planetary peace. And I think we will show that in our efforts here at Positive Peace Society. And from today's session, I also realized that how regional and local players are very important. And then we should also approach peace from maybe try to approach it from a non-Western kind of view as well. And maybe peace can have different kind of approaches and forms. So we should not be sticking with just one kind of way of doing it. We should be open and allowed to view it in different ways. And then, yeah, it was very wonderful. I'm looking forward to the next session, if we may have so very soon in near future. Thank you, Matthias, for your time. And thank you for all the esteemed guests for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vrajesh. Thank you for being a part of this dialogue today and to co-host it with us. Kathy, please.
Thank you, Matthias, and thank you, Vrajesh. It's wonderful to hear your voice. I work with young people and I fall in love every day because I think that the vision, I mean this quite sincerely, the vision, the ideas, the possibilities are endless. And it is, I so appreciate the challenges and the novel ways of seeing the world that are not staid and tired. And I appreciate also that we have many different narratives in different parts of the world because cultures and conditions and contexts differ so much from one place to another. For my closing remarks, I would love to remind us of Nelson Mandela's cups of tea. In Nelson Mandela's work, which we understand was about changing systems and structures. It was revolutionary. It was about changing worlds and creating worlds of belonging for many, many more who had not tasted freedom. He had this practice of inviting his captors to tea. And he would pour the tea himself. He'd make the tea and pour it himself and engage in these conversations with very, Afrikaner, like very strong Afrikaans people who were architects of the apartheid regime. And what this practice was about was him recognizing the sacred symbols of other people. And in the case of South Africa, at the time of freedom of the first political elections, the first free political elections, this was about recognizing rugby and the language of Afrikaans as very sacred to a people who he did not agree with. He didn't negotiate with them. He did not compromise his own principles. He did not forgo or forsake social justice and human justice and building a country of belonging for all. But he recognized these sacred symbols as a way of bridging, as a way of building bridges. So I really, for us, in terms of planetary peace, at least two of those components, in the great mix of many more ingredients of holding both these conversations of bridging, these acts and practices of bridging and looking for the sacred symbols of others. We don't have to agree with them, but we find them. And at the same time, remembering that we are building movements to change systems and structures. So it isn't one or the other. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Matthias. It's been an absolute joy and privilege to be part of this panel and to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. It's always a privilege hearing you, always. Robert, please, if you may come in.
Thank you very much. Yes, again, I want to start with my thanks. It's been amazing. So I met you, Matthias, over a year ago, and we've had a number of exchanges, and it's been great. I was delighted when you suggested this intergenerational dialogue. And although we're a small group tonight, and it is midnight or after midnight in the UK now, it's been really exciting to have this international and intergenerational dialogue. And I look forward to learning. I want to learn from young people. I want to learn from the youth and to have that different perspective. So I look forward to that continuing. I'd like to say something in praise of conflict, if I may, in praise of conflict. How does that sound? There's a documentary at the moment I'm watching on the BBC about the conflict between Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael. And as a result of their competition, the idea of this documentary is that they were each able to go much further beyond their creative limits and create the works which led to the Renaissance. So conflict can be a really useful thing. The trouble is when conflict is resolved with violence, whether it's violence between humans or violence in societies or violence against the planet. So I think one of the things I've really heard in this conversation is something, again, which echoes something that Elise Boulding talked about, which is, that peace is really about the ability to respond to conflict in a way that is creative and ideally that uses dialogue in order to move forward. So this dialogue tonight is a really good non-violent aspect. I don't think there have been many conflicts in this conversation, but I just felt I'm really enjoying this documentary about Leonardo and Michelangelo and Raphael. But it's an extraordinary idea that tension between when it's allowed to be channeled in an important and creative way can be something that we can benefit from. But let's continue this amazing dialogue and be creative and peaceful and harmonious together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. And it's always a matter of great joy to be sharing with you and learning along with you. Finally, Paul, if we may have your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Matthias, for organizing this and for bringing this very interesting group together. I learned a great deal, and I think the 50% that you are representing are going to, in my view, be the ones that are going to lead the movements of peace in coming years. So thank you for all that the whole group is doing, your team. Very much appreciated. I want to also thank Robert and Cathy-Mae for their wise counsel to young people here and for the work that both of you are doing respectively in developing ideas of peace. Some of them are 5,000 years old, the Buddhist ideas of not just peace, but love and compassion and all those other qualities of being human that have to be part of the redefinition of what it means to be human. So I greatly appreciate that. And I also want to thank Vrajesh for the initiative that you are taking with the Hiroshima University and the young people there and bringing in this idea of positive peace. And Jennifer and Jessica for your commentaries, very thoughtful, very heartfelt. I think all of us sort of feel what the problem is. And it seems to be that we didn't have enough time to establish a clear pathway to a solution. But there is a lot more that has not been said about planetary peace than has been said. So I would encourage Matthias and Vrajesh and other young people in this group to help orchestrate the next rounds of conversation and the movement building that Cathy-Mae called for. It is essential that we do that to get away from the rather jaded and used up idea of peace that we have inherited in the halls of power, and which are eventually going to make us create a sort of do a collective suicide. Because it's not just the wars, as we said before, it is all these other systems that are not peaceful. They're not designed on principles of peace. They've been designed on principles of killing and war. Something as fundamental as food, all you have to do is to look at the food system to see how much killing it involves. I mean, we have built an agricultural system which is totally extractive of all the life of soil. And we are leaving vast lands now incapable of producing food, incapable of generating life because the soil has been killed. We are killing animals, of course, I mentioned that earlier. So is there a principle that we can keep in the back of our mind that would allow us to overcome this killing way of living? And to me, that principle is the principle of regenesis. That for life to survive, you can take something from it, but you have to also give back something to it. You have to live your own life regeneratively. You have to create agriculture that is regenerative. You have to create medicine that is regenerative. You have to create education that is regenerative. Anything that is not regenerative and only extractive is ultimately going to collapse. So if there is a parting message over here that I want to leave behind with the group, it is about thinking through what it means to lead regenerative lives. All of us have an opportunity to do that. We are in the midst of these polycrises that scientists tell us are leading to a breakdown of ecosystems and social systems and economic systems. We have a principle of regenerativity which allows us to think about life differently. And I think our own lives is where we begin the transformation. So with that message, I'll hand it back to Matthias to perhaps bring us to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everyone who was a part of this conversation. It means so much to us to be able to talk about peace. I think it's a heavy burden, this idea that we'll lead the work on peace over the coming years, but we'll definitely try to be a part of that work, and we'll make our best towards it. For making the time so late to everyone, and to be here just sharing about peace. It's really meaningful to us. Please, let's keep this conversation going. The fact that the Zoom ends doesn't mean that the conversation does. Let's please follow us in social media. We have a Twitter account, we have a Instagram account, which are the 50% global, and also the PPS Hiroshima, and you will find all the organizations, also SGI, the Climate Youth Resilience, and of course Club of Rome. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's keep the woodwork. So please stay tuned. We're going to keep working on this, and I'm for sure we're going to have a couple more in the short term. We're going to have a couple more opportunities to keep talking about these and many important issues. So thank you very much and have a good night. Thank you to all the speakers.